Welcome to a new chapter. I am Optimus Prime, and this message is for my Transformers fan community. Each video is crafted with dedication and passion to bring our universe to life once more. I hope you enjoy this story, because a lot of heart has gone into it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, or I might not be able to protect you from Megatron, till all are one.
Story so far. Before an endless war raged between the Autobots and the Decepticons, before Orion Pax took on the mantle of Optimus Prime, before Earth ever learned about the strange robotic alien beings from Cybertron the Transformers, there was peace, there was society, there was wonder. It's evening on Cybertron as the recently forged Transformer Rubble excitedly scales the face of a mountain. In reality, the gargantuan countenance of an ancient, crumbling Transformer to take in the sunset. Much to the consternation of his new mentor, Bumblebee, who's been put in charge of escorting the freshly forged Cybertronian to an Energon Engineering station run by Brainstorm out in the remote Badlands. This tour of the planet's civilization is a rite of passage for all young Cybertronians, a chance to meet with different professions in anticipation of choosing an alternate mode and future career. While Bumblebee wants to keep schedule, Rubble just wants to see everything. And as he races up yet another ridge and loses his balance, the exasperated Bumblebee can only try to keep up. Rubble slithers to the bottom of the ditch, where he's found by a Void scavenger. Though the organic alien is initially curious about the little Transformer, they quickly scatter when Bumblebee's old friend Windblade arrives. Meeting up with her former teammate, Windblade explains that she's been dispatched by security operations to investigate the same Energon transmission station, after Brainstorm reported some anomalies with the station's monitoring equipment. The innocent Rubble, unaware of Windblade's concerns that something greater might be afoot, is just eager to have met a new friend, and so the three head out together. Elsewhere, Senator Orion Pax gazes down at the latest in a series of Ascenticon marches and worries for the future. Worries that only intensify when Ironhide tells him that his appointment is here to see him. Dismissing Ironhide's concerns that the situation may already be too far gone, Pax sits down to meet with none other than Megatron, his fellow senator and, more recently, the impromptu leader of the Ascenticon movement. Orion Pax tries to get his compatriot to see reason and postpone his latest rally in Tarn, pointing out that Megatron's demonstrations have been becoming increasingly violent as of late. Their last rally alone was responsible for injuring a dozen individuals. Megatron isn't having it, however, and points out that he wants to see change on Cybertron, and as long as he's free to do so, then he'll continue to speak his mind. As Megatron stands to leave, Pax asks him what kind of speech he'll give. But as he walks out the door, Megatron simply tells him that how Orion chooses to interpret his words is up to him, brushing off Ironhide in the process. As the stars come out, Rubble is entranced by the shimmering mechanical surface of Cybertron, and even more by Bumblebee's own pair of headlights. Bumblebee reminds him that the little Transformer may one day receive his own headlights when he chooses his alternate mode and a career. but Rubble is apprehensive. How long did it take them to choose their lives? Bumblebee gently explains that their choices aren't fixed, and points out that he recently left Cybertron's security division to focus on search and rescue work. Windblade points out that it wasn't entirely his choice to leave security, but before either bot can explain the situation further, Rubble's attention is drawn by a shooting star, or rather, as Windblade explains, a Titan, one of several gigantic, slumbering Cybertronians who have chosen to defend Cybertron from all extraplanetary threats. Over the next ridge, the group arrives at the Energon station, and while Bumblebee prepares to show Rubble inside, a broken window draws Windblade's attention. Drawing her sword, the security officer tells Bumblebee to help sweep the area, and for Rubble to stay put. Rubble does what he's told. Or rather, he does what he's told until the sound of sparking wires piques his curiosity, prompting him to investigate. It's a good thing he does, because it doesn't take long until he finds the source: Brainstorm's dead body.
My name is Rubble. I have been alive for 41 cycles, and in that short time, Bumblebee, my mentor, has shown me wonders and marvels beyond imagining. There's a question that would occur to anyone forged into such an amazing world and such a life. Can I lose this? Can I die? Bumblebee told me not to worry. We Cybertronians don't die easily. Some of us choose to sleep. Some of us merge into Cybertron itself. Not sure I understand that one. There are accidents, of course. Not all of Cybertron is entirely safe. There is violence out in the void and on colony planets, but not on Cybertron. Not now. No Cybertronian has died by the deliberate hand of another on this planet since before Bumblebee himself was forged. It does not happen here, he told me. And here, at the beginning of my 42nd cycle, I learned something that had not occurred to me before. My mentor does not know everything. Bumblebee can be wrong.
Rubble worriedly watches as Security Operations Head Chromia and Special Investigator Prowl secure the perimeter of the crime scene at Brainstorm's Energon transmission station. Prowl wonders if Brainstorm's death might have just been an accident, but Chromia is quick to point out signs of botched sabotage that lead her to suspect foul play. More specifically, foul play on the part of the Rise, which is just the excuse Chromia needs to start rounding up the troublemakers. In the meantime, Prowl and Chromia encourage Rubble and his guardian to continue their tour of Cybertron and meet up with Wheeljack at their next destination. As the two depart aboard a floating carrier, Chromia takes the opportunity to emphatically remind Rubble that this grisly scene is an aberration, an event that should not have happened on their peaceful world. With Rubble out of the way, Chromia wonders if the little bot is really as innocent as he lets on, but Windblade maintains that the newly forged Transformer had nothing to do with the murder. Instead, Chromia questions Windblade regarding her lenient treatment of the Voin scavenger she encountered, a possible suspect, on the way to the Energon station. When Prowl starts to push the issue, however, Chromia cuts him off and orders him to get the body ready for transport. As he does so, Chromia reminds Windblade that they'll need to stay ahead of the populace on this case. As the first murder in living memory, Cybertronians will be frightened, and it'll be their job to keep the public reassured. There is zero room for mistakes. With the crime scene a dead end in terms of possible leads, Chromia and Windblade put in a call to Senator Orion Pax to update him on their investigations. The senator has worse news for the trio. Megatron's latest Ascenticon rally in Tarn is pulling in record numbers, and Pax desperately needs more security forces on the ground in case things get ugly, as has been the case with several other Ascenticon gatherings. Even though their forces are already spread thin due to recent events, Chromia assures the Senator that she'll do what she can to help keep order. Dawn breaks as Rubble and Bumblebee arrive at the gigantic space elevator known as the Tether, the next leg of their journey across Cybertron. Despite his young protege's enthusiasm, Bumblebee warns Rubble to keep the events of last night a secret as they disembark and meet up with the enthusiastic Wheeljack. The kindly engineer is eager to give Rubble a tour of his workplace. As he explains for the benefit of his new student, the entire Tether is built to connect Cybertron to one of Termagax's crowning achievements, the Winged Moon. Once a simple moon of Cybertron, the satellite has been completely re-engineered into a massive geosynchronous energon harvesting station that captures and processes free-flowing energon from the very fabric of space-time. Though Rubble is briefly distracted by an organic skitter, Wheeljack offers him the chance to work at the Tether for the day, so as to better understand the ins and outs of engineering as one possible career choice, an offer that Rubble accepts. After a busy shift of lifting, hauling, welding, and sorting, Bumblebee returns to pick up Rubble as evening falls. Pleased with Rubble's performance, Wheeljack invites the pair to take a rooftop seat to take in the fruits of their labor and watch the Winged Moon unfold into its harvester configuration. The two chat about energon harvesting for a while, but when the conversation inadvertently turns towards Brainstorm, Rubble can't help but ask about the Rise. Bumblebee explains that they're a radical group, violent extremists who espouse many of the same views as Megatron's Ascenticons. Concerned, Rubble wonders if he'll have to choose a side one day, but his mentor assures him that he'll be allowed to make that choice in his own time, or, like Bumblebee, simply remain independent from any of Cybertron's many factions. Their conversation is cut short by the majestic scene of the Winged Moon coming online, its metal surface unfurling like the petals of a flower as the station begins its evening harvest. Then and there, Rubble declares the sight the most amazing thing he's ever seen, and Bumblebee initially tries to correct him, but then changes his mind and agrees with his young friend. It really is the most amazing thing he's ever seen. In the city of Tarn, meanwhile, the crowd eats up Megatron's words as he launches into his latest tirade, arguing against the restrictive laws and ordinances that have, in his eyes, weakened the power and potential of the Cybertronian race. But as he begins to praise Termagax, the very first Ascenticon, his speech is interrupted by an explosion that knocks him and Soundwave off the stage. As a pair of shots fired by an unseen assailant ricochet off of his armor, Megatron yells for the crowd to get to cover as he leaps towards the source of the shots, only to find that the culprit has already escaped. Megatron is far from cowed, however. Then and there, the Ascenticon leader swears that there will be a reckoning. A concerned Orion Pax and his compatriots watch as Megatron broadcasts a new proclamation for all of Cybertron to hear, announcing that the Autobot-controlled Senate and its security operations are no longer capable of keeping the planet safe in the wake of Brainstorm's death and the recent attack at his latest Ascenticon rally in Tarn. Megatron unveils his new Ascenticon Guard, a selection of volunteers who will police Ascenticon gatherings for any potential threats, internal or external. Chromia is immediately alarmed by the presence of Quake amidst the guardsmen, chilled by the prospect of Megatron hiring a such violent bot as his private enforcer. While Orion heads out to an emergency Senate meeting, Prowl and Chromia lay out their findings so far. Chromia informs Pax that 20 members of the Rise are now in Autobot custody, though Prowl points out that none of them are part of the group's innermost members, leading him to conclude that, since the leadership have conclusively gone to ground in anticipation of a police crackdown, the group is definitely implicated in the murder. The tense conversation is interrupted by a hysterical Froid. Believing Orion to be at fault, the psychologist demands an explanation for why Quake has resurfaced as a member of Megatron's militia. Froid briskly reminds Orion of Quake's dark history. A veteran of the war against the threefold spark, Quake's sociopathic love of violence fueled his ability to spread destruction, but rendered him unable to cope with the realities of peacetime, thus making Quake one of the very few patients that Froid and his myriad therapies were unable to conclusively treat. Orion manages to keep Froid's concerns at bay by telling him that he'll investigate the matter, but as soon as they're out of earshot, the senator reminds his compatriots that solving Brainstorm's murder comes first. Chromia prepares to lead a conclusive sweep of the Energon transmission station for clues while Prowl reports on his progress with Cybertron's Void community in the hopes of tracking down the unlicensed scavenger Windblade encountered on the night of the murder, though the highly individualistic nature of the species has impeded his inquiries. With Senate Head Sentinel Prime off-world, and with Cybertron now caught between a paralyzed Senate and increasingly riled Ascenticon sympathizers, Orion takes command and orders Ironhide to keep Sentinel updated on the situation as it unfolds. As Ironhide departs to do so, he points out the remarkable luck of the Rally Crashers, who were able to strike at Megatron and slip away unscathed, and Orion can only agree. Elsewhere, at a deserted testing track, Rubble is supposed to be learning about potential alternate modes and watches as Bumblebee puts his own vehicle form through its paces, though he's more interested in taking in the sight of the winged moon as it concludes its nightly Energon harvest. Undeterred, Bumblebee decides to approach the topic from another perspective, drawing Rubble's attention to another of Cybertron's denizens as she trundles past the outskirts of the city. Though Rubble initially mistakes the colossal crawler for a Titan, Bumblebee explains that her name is Leviathan, an immense Cybertronian who uses her own alternate mode to endlessly traverse the plains of Cybertron and harvest ore to be melted down and processed into usable materials, including the living metal from which all Transformers, including Rubble, are forged. The lesson imparted, Bumblebee turns Rubble's attention back to the task at hand and asks if he wants to scan any of the model vehicles kept on the track for this purpose. But when B soon realizes that Rubble's attention is starting to wander again, he concludes that his time with Wheeljack has inspired the little bot. Next time they visit Wheeljack, he assures Rubble they'll take the Tether all the way up to the moon itself. But Rubble doesn't have time to respond before Windblade arrives with an urgent message for Bumblebee, telling him that he's needed at the Senate building. Windblade promises to take Rubble back to his quarters, and as he transforms and speeds off, Bumblebee tells his protege to use their private channel on his communicator if he needs to talk. As the pair walk through the busy streets, crowded with Cybertronians and aliens alike, Rubble confides in her that he's worried that Bumblebee is disappointed in him. Windblade emphatically refutes this. With the Nominus Edict limiting the forgings of new Cybertronians, newborn Transformers like Rubble are a rare sight, and Bumblebee was overjoyed to be selected as a mentor. His attitude, she opines, is due to the fraught situation with the Ascenticons and the unpleasant business with Brainstorm. A long-lived species such as theirs has not had to grapple with the concept of death in a long, long time. Inside Rubble's apartment, however, the pair are surprised to see Chromia and her consultant Geomotus. Rubble is initially confused when Geomotus, bluntly asks him to move so that he can see his shapes, a set of geometric blocks that he carries with him at all times, until Chromia and Windblade take it in turns to explain to Rubble that Geomotus is another of Rod's clients, a neurodivergent bot whose knowledge of Cybertron's geology lets him pick up details that others might miss. Indeed, Geomotus has used his unusual talents to assist with police investigations as a specialist more than once in the past, so long as he limits his interactions with the notoriously abrasive Prowl. With security short-staffed, Chromia explains, she needs Windblade by her side as they conduct another sweep of the Energon transmission station, in the hopes that Geomotus's expertise might be able to turn up a new lead. After linking Rubble's communicator to Windblade and Chromia's, the three head out. Once out of Rubble's apartment, however, Windblade pointedly asks Chromia if she's installed a tracker in the communicator link. Windblade is understandably shocked when the answer is a yes, but Chromia cuts her off. The tracker will only activate if they have a good reason to do it. After all, she reminds Windblade, the odds are that Rubble is completely innocent, but they can't take any chances, and anyone could be a suspect. As night falls, Orion is on a mission of his own out in the Barrens. Passing the silent bodies of those Transformers who have chosen to merge with their homeworld, he forces open a heavy vault door and strides inside. It's not long before Orion comes face to face with the looming shape of Codexa, her still living body almost completely ensconced by the fabric of Cybertron itself, and tells her that they need to talk. Windblade, Chromia, and Geomotus pick their way through the Badlands of Cybertron as Geomotus uses his skills to search for any new potential evidence. It's not long, however, before a figure in the distance draws Windblade's attention, a figure that Chromia immediately recognizes as Cyclonus, a reclusive hermit who's chosen to cut ties with modern Cybertronian civilization. The two police bots give chase. Windblade is able to quickly subdue the fleeing bot, informing him that they just need to ask a few questions about Brainstorm's recent murder. Cyclonus initially evades their questions, but finally reveals that he did see Brainstorm arrive at the Energon transmission station not long before his death. Chromia isn't convinced, however, and asks him to come to Iacon so that they can conduct a proper interview. If he doesn't show up in one cycle, she warns, then security operations will be back with reinforcements to bring him in. As Cyclonus watches the three depart, he mumbles to an unseen voice that he has no intention of going to Iacon, intent on continuing his self-imposed exile. The voice, it turns out, belonged to ghostly figments of Cyclonus's imagination. The mangled remains of his old wartime compatriots chide each other, and Cyclonus for not telling Chromia the truth, for Cyclonus really did see another bot on the night of the murder. In Iacon itself, joyful crowds gather at the Great Pyramid to celebrate the unveiling of a newly forged Transformer, among them Bumblebee and Rubble. Rubble is captivated by the sheer size of the crowd, but Bumblebee isn't quite as moved. It feels wrong, he concludes, to have a new forging so soon after Rubble's own creation and Brainstorm's murder. The conversation comes to end when Rubble spies the new Transformer leaving the pyramid. Just like Rubble was, she is greeted by Orion Pax, filling in for the still-absent Sentinel Prime, and introduced to her mentor, Arcee, ready to begin her own journey of self-discovery. As the crowd disperses, Bumblebee and Rubble pass by a gaggle of fervent reversionists. Bumblebee is quick to dismiss their religious fanaticism, but a nearby confrontation between an Autobot and an Ascenticon threatens to turn ugly, and Bumblebee intervenes before anyone can get seriously injured. Unfortunately, the scuffle has caught the attention of an already irritated Prowl and his partner Barricade, annoyed with having been pulled off more pressing assignments to run security duty. Rubble pipes up. Perhaps he could be of use in identifying the Voin he encountered. Bumblebee gently reminds his ward that the compound nature of the species makes an individual Voin are almost impossible to identify, and an uninterested Prowl snaps at the both of them to leave. On their way back to Rubble's apartment, Bumblebee tells the young bot that he needs to leave him again. A funeral is being held that night for Brainstorm, and Bumblebee will be attending, though when Rubble wonders if this is connected to his previous leave of absence, Bumblebee brushes off the question and tells him not to worry about it. Evening falls as the mourners prepare themselves. The sun slashed across Cybertron's steel horizon. It was as if the planet held its breath for a moment, and then slowly let it go. Chromia stood on a hill, watching the lights of the gleaming cities below. Each light was a memory, a loss. Optimus gazed out over the same city from a balcony, torn between uncertainty and unease. Megatron's expression was firm, yet something flickered in his eyes. Was it regret or acceptance? Bumblebee stood with his small shoulders slumped, crushed under the weight of everything that had happened. His silence spoke of a storm raging within, and it was as if the planet, trembling one last time, whispered, "I'm going with you." That night, a reversionist orator presides over the ceremony that will see Brainstorm's remains cremated within a plasma pyre, metaphorically returning his body to Cybertron. Ironhide whispers to Orion that the notably atheistic Brainstorm would have hated having a reversionist speak at his funeral, and his words prompt Orion to grimly reflect on his recent history of compromise with his fellow Autobots. Compromise to allow the reversionists to preside over the funeral, lest the group feel antagonized and join the Ascenticons. Compromise to allow the recent forging to take place over his concerns that the ceremony was a calculated political move to paper over the rising tension in Cybertronian society. As Brainstorm's coffin is guided toward the pyre, Orion wonders if it's him who can't keep up with changing times. Orion turns his thoughts to his fellow senator, Megatron, and pointedly wonders aloud how Termagax would feel about the way her ideas have been co-opted by Megatron's leadership of her Ascenticons and the recent actions of the Rise. Exasperated, Megatron snaps that he's already denounced the actions of the Rise and will gladly do so again if needed, when Orion suggests that Termagax speak publicly to weigh in on the question. Megatron reminds his fellow senator that she has voluntarily gone into seclusion, and a bot with such deep-held convictions will not be easily persuaded to return. But when Ironhide suggests that Termagax is afraid of seeing what Megatron and his followers have done with her movement, Megatron nearly raises his hand in anger and is only stopped by Orion. Megatron tersely reminds Ironhide of his place and suggests that they both respect this somber occasion. As the Cybertronians look on, Brainstorm's coffin is consumed by light as his coffin enters the pyre. Megatron records the latest in a series of political broadcasts that will be played across Cybertron. The Ascenticon leader rails against the Nominus Edict that has, in his view, stymied the expansion of the Cybertronian race. Soundwave observes that this latest message will reach thousands, and his words are indeed borne out when the message is broadcast, with a crowd gathering around a screen in the streets of Iacon to watch. But Chromia, who's passing by one such broadcast, has more pressing concerns. A call with Sideswipe regarding Energon distribution records confirms her suspicions that a dozen members of the Rise have indeed stopped withdrawing their regular fuel allotments and gone into hiding. But she's blindsided when Sideswipe reveals that more than 200 Cybertronians have abruptly gone off the grid in the days since Brainstorm's murder. Elsewhere, Prowl reflects on the recent investigations from the privacy of his office as he tends to his pet. Prowl muses aloud that Cybertron's unbroken peace and prosperity has dulled his old predatory instincts, and the loss of this old edge is why it's taken him this long to figure out how to best root out an unlicensed Voin scavenger. Rather than operating within the Voin community, he needs to find its clients and scare them into cooperating with his inquiries. At the Tether, Wheeljack bids Rubble goodnight at the end of another training shift. Rubble waits for Bumblebee to pick him up so that they can take the space elevator up to the winged moon itself. But Bumblebee calls in on Rubble's communicator with bad news. They'll need to postpone their trip, as his mentor has another one of his pressing secret appointments. Bumblebee promises the crestfallen Rubble that he'll take him there as soon as he can. Wheeljack comforts Rubble by assuring him that Bumblebee has a good reason for doing so, and so the little bot heads back to his quarters alone. And not far away, Bumblebee transforms and speeds off through a run-down part of town, down into an abandoned mineshaft. Rubble's trip home takes him through Iacon's Energon storage fields, where he stops to marvel at the city's vast stockpiles of fuel, past the Iovan habitat, a vast arcology constructed to house Cybertron's population of Iovan refugees, and into the tangled streets of the city's bustling Xeno quarter. Fascinated by the diversity of the planet's organic immigrants, Rubble's attention wanders until a gaggle of Voin pass by, with one of them offhandedly recognizing Rubble as the small Cybertronian. Realizing that this Voin must be the same unlicensed scavenger he encountered on the night of the murder, Rubble, eager to help Prowl and the other members of security operations in their investigation, impulsively gives chase. In the depths of the mine, meanwhile, Bumblebee meets up with his mysterious contact. Although he was expecting Elita 1, he's instead confronted by none other than Senator Soundwave, who brushes off his concerns and abruptly plants a metal pole into the ground before he permits their conversation to continue. Rubble's chase takes him deeper and deeper into the Xeno quarter, passing one alien after the next, but he's unable to locate the mystery Voin. Rubble instead tries to use his communicator to contact Bumblebee, but is unable to remember how to turn on the device. And that's when a crunching noise catches his attention, followed by one of the Voin's slaved organics bolting past, shrieking in terror. Bumblebee's meeting with Soundwave starts off rough and doesn't get much better. Elita 1 might command the new Ascenticon Guard, but it's Soundwave who's in charge of recruiting new members, and neither of them are particularly inclined to trust a former member of security operations. Bumblebee tries to point out that he's far from the only member of the force to join the Guard, and besides, he was expelled from the organization. But Soundwave retorts by pointing out that he's also a known Autobot associate. Bumblebee finally confesses the real reason why he's met up with Soundwave. Recent events have caused Bumblebee to realize that their peaceful, carefully curated world is beginning to break down, and the Autobots have proven themselves unable to handle the burgeoning crisis. Moreover, as a new mentor, Bumblebee is willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that Rubble can have a future, though he trails off, noting that something is making it hard to think. The senator explains that he took the precaution of planting his electromagnetic suppressor, which blocks all incoming and outgoing transmissions to ensure the privacy of their conversation. Elsewhere, Rubble has discovered the Voin as he peers around the corner, but he's not the only one to have done so. Quake has found it first, having smashed its glass tank and crushed the helpless Voin in his metal fist. Confusion turns to horror when Quake spies the young bot at the end of the alleyway and turns to pursue him. Rubble flees back the way he came, desperately trying to raise Bumblebee on his communicator, unaware that Bumblebee can't hear him thanks to Soundwave, and unexpectedly reaches Prowl's private channel instead. Rubble blurts out that the Void's been killed, but Prowl doesn't have time to process this before an explosive round from Quake's turret blows a hole in the wall and knocks Rubble off his feet. A desperate Prowl attempts to get Rubble to tell him what's going on, but all he can hear are Rubble's own shouted pleas for mercy as Quake closes in. The very last thing Rubble sees is Quake's fist coming down on him, before his vision fades to static and then nothing.
My name is Rubble. I have been alive for 41 cycles, and in that short time, Bumblebee, my mentor, has shown me wonders and marvels beyond imagining. There's a question that would occur to anyone forged into such an amazing world and such a life. Can I lose this? Can I die? Bumblebee told me not to worry. We Cybertronians don't die easily. Some of us choose to sleep. Some of us merge into Cybertron itself. Not sure I understand that one. There are accidents, of course. Not all of Cybertron is entirely safe. There is violence out in the void and on colony planets, but not on Cybertron. Not now. No Cybertronian has died by the deliberate hand of another on this planet since before Bumblebee himself was forged. It does not happen here, he told me. And here, at the beginning of my 42nd cycle, I learned something that had not occurred to me before. My mentor does not know everything. Bumblebee can be wrong.
The Nominus Edict, abbreviated version. 1. No further colonies will be established unless by unanimous agreement of the Senate. 2. No Energon harvesting will be undertaken in sectors inhabited or claimed by other sentient life, or in sectors adjoining such sectors. 3. Energon reserves stored on Cybertron or in the immediate system will at all times be maintained at a level sufficient to supply all foreseeable needs for 10 kilocycles. The 4th. The Senate will define a frequency of forgings that is consistent with the maintenance of such Energon reserves. The 5. The Senate will define a level of Energon provision directly to all Cybertronians that is consistent with the maintenance of such Energon reserves. 6. Non-integral weapons, judged to possess lethal capability, will be prohibited on Cybertron and in its immediate system. Nominus Prime, Autobot Leader. In Codex's chamber, Orion Pax attempts to rouse the somnolent Cybertronian in front of him, her immobile body merged with the fabric of Cybertron itself. Codexa is not so easily awoken, however, and her long hibernation means that she barely recognizes the form of her former compatriot. Undeterred, Orion tries to jog her memory by asking if she remembers Megatron, and the name stirs Codexa's own recollection. Codexa wonders if the two were friends, and Orion hesitantly agrees. 2 megacycles ago, in the wake of the destructive war against the Threefold Spark, the archivist Orion Pax and the miner Megatron join in the rebuilding efforts, working together to haul a damaged statue of Primus from the rubble. Orion is just glad to be rebuilding after the destructive war, but Megatron isn't content with just returning to the status quo. He wants more out of life and invites his friend to watch him compete in the new arena that the Constructicons are working to build. But, as the two work, a careless construction worker accidentally lets their load of girders slip, forcing Megatron to leap to Orion's rescue, safely knocking the falling beams out of the way, while Orion struggles to keep the statue upright. The day saved, the two friends lever their statue back into position, as Megatron teases Orion about the impromptu rescue. In the present day, Orion recounts his history with Megatron to Codexa. Although they've known one another for a long time, and although Orion has always thought that he understood Megatron, recent events since even before Megatron took control of the Ascenticons and the crisis of the Rise have led the Senator to wonder if he ever really knew the charismatic bot, especially after their adventure together at the Winged Moon. Codexa vaguely remembers the moon, describing it as snared and bound to the Greater. And Orion remembers his last visit there with Megatron. 300 kilocycles ago, Orion Pax visits the Tether just before the grand unveiling of the recently completed Winged Moon as it prepares for its inaugural fueling cycle, and is surprised to see that Megatron has also decided to pay the structure a visit. Megatron visibly bristles when Orion wonders this aloud, believing that Orion is insulting the miners who helped hollow out the moon, and Orion de-escalates the situation by informing his comrade that he's there on the orders of head archivist Codexa, who wants to see the moon before the politicians arrive. Orion asks Megatron if what he heard from Codexa is true, if Megatron is really going to run for election to the Senate, and Megatron confirms it. The miner is confident in his decision to stand behind Termagax, creator of the Winged Moon and the tether that binds it to Cybertron, as part of the recently founded Ascenticon faction, and immediately brushes off Orion's doubts about Termagax's views. Megatron counters that the terms of the Nominus Edict has long stopped ensuring the continued peace and stability of Cybertronian civilization, and is now contributing to its stagnation. He wants Cybertronians to stop living in their fear of the past and move on. As the two board the elevator that will take them all the way up to the moon itself, Orion drops his own bombshell on Megatron and announces that he's leaving Cybertron to tour the colonies for a time. As Codexa herself has announced her intention to step down as head archivist and merge with Cybertron, Orion wants to see everything that the galaxy has to offer before she does. He wants to step up as head archivist due to his knowledge, not just out of inertia. As they approach the moon, the automated elevator announces that they'll be changing their gravitational orientation. Just before they do, however, Megatron unexpectedly flicks the emergency stop switch. The cage grinds to a halt, leaving the two floating in zero gravity, caught in the space between the two celestial bodies. Orion is confused, but Megatron reveals the real reason why he came to the Winged Moon. For Termagax has given Megatron a task of his own, to better understand the nature of Cybertron and its civilization. As the two drift out into space, Megatron explains his realization as he produces a pair of levitators and hands one to Orion. True balance is but an illusion. Just as Cybertron spins in its orbit, taking everything with it, their universe is an ever-changing one full of variables. Individual Cybertronians must discard their concepts of stability and equilibrium and move with the times, lest they be left behind. And, to punctuate this lesson, Orion and Megatron are dragged back into Cybertron's gravity well, streaking towards the planetary surface at terminal velocity. The two plummet towards the nearby leachate lagoons, as Megatron shouts for Orion to not deploy his levitator until the last possible moment. And while Megatron successfully activates and slows his fall, Orion's brakes as he thumbs the activator, and the young archivist makes an undignified splashdown. Megatron is jubilant at their adventure, and hopes that the experience will inspire Orion on his future travels. As Orion pulls himself out of the water, however, he grumbles that Megatron might be a bit mad. Megatron immediately snaps that Orion can do what he likes out in space, then, after all, Megatron tells him as he storms off, Cybertron is where the future will be built. Codexa tells Orion that she remembers Orion Pax and Megatron, two bots brimming with potential. but Orion's mind is on other things now. Between murder investigations and Ascenticons on the march, he wonders aloud if he can even trust Megatron to keep his word. Codexa reminds him that Cybertron once trusted Exarchon, leader of the threefold spark, but Orion isn't so quick to judge. Megatron, he maintains, is nothing like Exarchon. Codexa finally asks what he wants, and the senator tells her that he needs validation. Recent events have pushed Pax into making ever more drastic decisions, and he feels that his next action, a betrayal that may endanger others, might lead him down the path of no return. Codexa muses aloud that she remembers Orion Pax, a bot who always concealed what he felt under formality, afraid to let himself simply be. When Orion asks about Megatron, Codexa simply replies that although Cybertron is composed of millions and millions of individual sparks, all of them together make up the vast tapestry that is Cybertron, bound together by a common purpose, but not anymore. This single song of a united Cybertron is beginning to falter, and Orion, finally realizing what must be done, grimly agrees.